What's up everyone, welcome back to more Reddit stories about Karens, insane people, and all that kind of stuff. And as usual, we got some more Reddit posts to check out today, so feel free to share your thoughts about today's stories down in the comments and we're getting right into it. You sure showed me. I'll just tear up this check for $3,500 and you get nothing. You lose. Good day. When I was a property shepherd for banks that foreclosed on properties, I was often asked to see if the occupants would accept money in exchange for surrendering the property in clean, intact condition and skipping the eviction. I had nothing to do with the foreclosure or eviction, and they used me because the lawyers charged hundreds of dollars an hour for that kind of thing. They prepared the offer, I presented it. If they said yes, the bank sent me a check. I inspected the house, and if it was clean and intact, handed over the check. Important note, there was an eviction clock running. If I did not report that they had complied with the agreement, the eviction would proceed. They did not stop that process unless I was successful. So I was helpless to grant extra time to move out beyond, the agreement says be out by the 14th. You are working hard. The bank is closed. I can come back first thing in the morning, and if you are done, I'll release the check and tell the bank you complied. I was dealing with a couple in a 4,000 square foot house. They had been fighting the foreclosures, then fighting the eviction, and the bank and lawyers were sick of them. I delivered the offer, $3,500 to be out in 2 weeks. It was explicitly clear that I was not from the bank. I was not from the lawyer's office. They showed up at my office anyway and tried to convince us to sell them the house which was not for sale, which they couldn't afford or they wouldn't be facing an eviction, which wasn't ours. They didn't like any of those truths, said we had better start checking under our car before starting it up, and stormed out. They wanted the money, and I always did what little I could to help people make the deadline. I always offered to come by a few days early and point out what needed to be clean. Normal wear and tear? No problem. Stained carpet? This isn't a security deposit, so unless it was a fresh, intentional stain, I didn't care. Missing fixtures? That's a problem. Unswept floors? Problem. Bags of rotting food in the garage? You get the picture. I went over for a pre-inspection. Not even close. I pointed out what needed to happen. They asked if they could have the check now to hire cleaners, and they would totally have it ready in time. Being ugly, not stupid, I declined and said I would see them on the date they agreed to. I showed up. They hadn't cleaned up anything since my previous visit. They demanded the check anyway. They worked hard to come up with excuses. They were tired after threatening to kill me with a car bomb. They needed the money for the down payment on another house. Won't I do them a favor? They will do anything for the check except clean. I marked them non-compliant and left, returning the check to the lawyer's office. A week later, the lawyer's office told me I was free to take possession of the house and start my processes. Still lots of trash, grime everywhere, many missing light fixtures. Best of all, they had taken all of the towel racks and toilet paper holders, ripping them straight out of the wall along with significant chunks of drywall. They sure taught me a lesson by damaging a house that wasn't mine. And for skipping at best 3 hours of cleaning, they lost out on $3,500, even though they deserved that money for being stressed. New neighbors downed 20+ trees on their land, now cutting protected habitat on shared easement. They are planning to develop the natural hillside above our house into multiple single-family houses. I know there is no recourse for the 20+ very old trees they cut already on their land, but they are now cutting willows down and brush in an area that is protected habitat. This is stated on their survey and development plan that they forwarded to me. The land is private property owned by them, but we have an easement agreement covering the protected area. There is a specific breed of endangered toads that live there. The protected area is a stream/waterway that runs through both of our properties out to a large storm drain below my property. The EPA has already been notified by another neighbor and they were on site according to that neighbor, but they have done nothing. I have been taking pictures of the destruction and have asked the chainsaw-happy neighbors not to continue, but they aren't stopping. Is there anything left I can do? I feel that this is absolutely morally wrong. But more than that, there has to be some legal recourse for destruction of a protected habitat in tree grove, right? Who can I contact about this? I know this is a complicated situation and I am willing to clarify further if I left anything out. Any insight helps. Edit. Spoke to an attorney today. We are prepared to issue a cease and desist. Calling the neighbors again tomorrow morning to try to get them to stop on their own before going the legal route. Edit 2. Update. City code enforcement is trying to serve them a cease and desist. They are evading code enforcement by only working early mornings. They are still felling trees on the hill, but not in the protected creek area. I didn't realize how much brush they had cut prior, but the creek is very brown and seems to be somewhat filled in with soil. Already confirmed with planning department that they are currently not permitted for any type of work. Edit 3. They have been served at least one cease and desist. They are ignoring that and continuing to cut brush and smaller trees in the protected area. They've also filled in the stream area with soil. They've cut the branches off one large oak tree in the protected area and on our shared easement. They are dodging calls from everybody and maybe poisoning wildlife. We have found multiple squirrels and small mammals dead grouped in the same areas with no immediately visible cause of death or signs of predator interactions. The earliest Fish and Game said they can get an officer out is Tuesday. There may be nothing left to protect by Tuesday. The workers were asked by another neighbor what the plan is for the area, and they said clear cutting. I am so incredibly frustrated with the situation and the disrespect these people have for the land in our community. Edit 4. Update. Fish and Wildlife have told us that they are going to charge everyone involved with the quote, gross annihilation of a federally protected habitat. They have issued one more cease and desist. They now have at least 2 cease and desists, one from Fish and Wildlife and one from the planning department. I woke up this morning to chainsaws again. They are actively violating both cease and desists and are continuing to cut. They've cleared a large chunk of willows and pecan trees on our easement, probably 8 to 9 10-plus-year-old trees today. They started work at 4 a.m. They're speeding up to avoid getting stopped. Found out the grandfather is picking up random workers from a Home Depot nearby and paying them to clear cut the whole area. We are preparing to sue them for damages and potential liability if our house were to flood or get damaged due to their actions. Edit 5. Code enforcement was out this morning. No one has been on the property today cutting or clearing. Fish and Wildlife may have spooked them. I was told by the neighbor directly contacting the Fish and Wildlife agent not to talk to the offending neighbors any further directly, in order to avoid anything that can be seen as harassment. They have left canisters of gasoline and oil out and open in the middle of the dead cut brush. Fish and Wildlife has been notified of this, and the risk of fire is very high in our area. We have had major wildfires in the area often. One day without cutting is a small win, but whenever I walk out my front door I can see directly out to the street now, because the tree line has been thinned so much. The coast live oak that they cut all the lower branches off of may not survive because it's essentially been girdled. There are only about 15 trees left where there used to be 30-ish, not counting the ones up on the hill. Edit 6. Bad news. Fish and Wildlife dropped the cease and desist order because they paid the necessary fines. The amount of the fines has not been disclosed. I do not know if they are still trying to charge them criminally or not. Fish and Wildlife said all the animals have migrated out of the area due to the destruction, so it is no longer their problem what happens to the area going forward. I am pissed. This seems so backwards, but they refuse to do anything more. As far as I know, code enforcement has a cease and desist out still, and there has been no cutting today. My faith, however, that the area will be replanted or restored is gone. I am trying to find a professional of some sort to inform us of the increased risk of flooding and damage to our property, but I am not sure who or what professional to call. I don't even know if legal action against the responsible party is a possibility. Ideally, we could sue them for damage to the shared easement and increased flooding risk, but I don't know if there's any leg to stand on there. Update. This is a follow-up on my last post as the circumstances have changed dramatically. Fish and Wildlife and the city planning departments have both dropped their cease and desist orders against the offending neighbors after they paid 6-figure fines. They will not be required to replant the area, serve jail time, or get their future permits pulled. The work they are doing is completely unpermitted and has caused other homeowners property damages. Down fence, hit water main line, broken pipes, in addition to the environmental destruction. The city and Fish and Wildlife have essentially said it's pay to play, even though there are multiple endangered species in the area, including an endangered toad and an endangered bird. This is not to mention the other wildlife, coyotes, bobcats, squirrels, rabbits, hawks, eagles, etc., that have all moved out of the area. I am continuing to pester the city officials to pull their building permits whenever they put them in. In the city's code, I read the whole thing. It says the unpermitted work can result in a 5 to 7 year ban on building on a property. I am trying to hold them to that. They are planning on putting 6 to 8 houses on a 4-acre lot that is supposed to be a suburban rural community, with lot sizes 1 acre plus per house. There are only 6 or 7 trees left out of the 20 plus that used to be in the protected area. Due to this, my house is at an increased risk of flooding and storm damage, as well as mudslide risk from the hill. I am working on getting flood insurance, but I'd like to get a professional out to look at the house and give us a better picture of any mitigation efforts we can do to reduce this risk. But I don't exactly know what type of professional that would be. Engineer? Biologist? I would really appreciate help in that area. Additionally, I would appreciate any advice on any other organizations I could contact regarding getting the area replanted or their building permits pulled. I have exhausted the EPA, Fish and Wildlife, and the City Planning and Code Enforcement departments. I am also working on getting a surveyor out to redefine where the easement is on our property line to try and save the few trees left there. There was no reason for them to clear-cut the area other than greed. I desperately don't want them to win. Yeah, this is honestly incredibly messed up. And this comment here says, so the takeaway from this post is that if you are fast enough in destroying your local ecosystem, you can just pay a fine and proceed to build your multi-million-dollar land development? Good to know. This really sucks. Yeah, and that does seem to be what's going on here. They seem to have known exactly what they were doing. This was calculated and precise. They got it done as fast as they could, while dodging any of the agencies trying to enforce it in the process. And then once they do eventually get hit with fines, that's just chump change and no big deal to pay off. And then they can just move on and build their multi-million-dollar development. Seriously messed up, and it sounds like there's not really a happy ending here. I guess just a real-life example of the kind of messed up stuff you can get away with if you have money. Anyway friends, that's going to be all for today. Thank you for watching. As always, I do appreciate it. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already for more Reddit content like this, and drop a comment down below. So take care, stay tuned for more, and I'll see you next time.